Okay, so I'm recording and testing. We've got sound. So if you do want to put it on your home machine, make sure that you download the hub first and then find the version in the archive that we're using because we're not using the current version. There's something called long-term support releases, LTS releases, and that's what we want to use. The newest version actually is a sort of a beta type of release. And the one that we have on these machines that you're going to want is 2022.3, and it's .0 down here from May 30th, 2023. So you would go to the Unity Hub and download it, or download the Windows version if you're on Windows. You can look at the release notes here as well. But that should show up in your hub once you download it. So if you go to your machine and you search for Unity Hub, you should find it. And if you click on it, as I mentioned, it's going to ask you to sign in. And so you're going to need to sign in with your password that you have. And we sort of tried to make sure that all the machines were working in here. I think there might be one machine on the back row that may not be working, that he has to still do something with. If it's not working on that machine, you're gonna have to move to another one. So let me go ahead. While I'm doing this, I'll also log in up here to make sure that I can tell you all the steps. So yeah, you type in Unity Hub for your search in your launch window and choose the app. And mine actually just opened because I've logged into it on this machine before, so I don't think I have to type in anything. I've got a test project I already created on this machine. So it should, you might notice at the top of the hub something about version 3.52 is now available to start installing. Please don't click that. You don't have the permissions to install that, and it's just going to make it so your machine won't work anymore until we get an admin in here to actually install that. So don't click any buttons like that. Always say no for something like that on a machine that you don't yourself administer, because you won't be able to go through the whole process. Okay, and you can see that if I look at my installs here, I've got a couple of installations. The installs is on the left. You have your projects. You have your installs. You have a learning area, which is going to take you to, videos and tutorials and stuff. You have a community area, which has the asset store and answers and forums in it. and you have, I'll go back to the projects area. You probably won't have anything in here. It'll be empty. And you can see that when you create a project, it tells you what version you created with it over here as the editor version. And so you want to stick with whatever editor version that you have, because backwards compatibility is not really a thing with game engines, and you don't want to try to have to go backwards. So did everybody in here get it to open and see what I see, your hub? Okay, great. Anybody having a problem? You're to install or to just open? Does it say it's in? I don't think it should be installing anything. It should just be opening the version on the machine. Okay. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do with this game engine is we're going to create a project just like we did before. You're going to use your new project button in the upper right to do that. Oh, let's just stop for a second. Just hold up for a second while we wait for Ariana, and let's make sure that you have in your downloads folder the standard assets package. It should say Unity package file, and the Unity starter scripts. Make sure you have that. And I would go ahead and pull both of those into a folder on your system that's maybe in where your projects are going to be. So if I go to my class folder, and I'm going to start a new, create a new folder, and I'll just call it Unity project class. And that's where I'll choose to make my Unity project in here, and I'll go ahead and drag my standard assets fixed package and my Unity starter scripts into there as well. So I have those all in a place that is easy for me to get to. And I'll go ahead and right-click my zip file of the starter scripts, and I'll go ahead and extract those here. Extract all. So I have those, and if I look in that folder, I'll see there's another folder, and then there's 5 scripts here, and they're all .cs scripts, which is a C# script. Okay, are we good now? Let's we can create a project. Let's go ahead and do it. So if I hit new project here, I want to make sure at the top it says the version that I want to create here, which is 2022.3.0. That's the version on these other machines that they have. And so I'll be able to move it back and forth to the lab if I want to. We're going to use 3D Core as the template that we're going to use. And we can see that this is an empty 3D project that uses Unity's built-in renderer. There's a lot of other things here. If we were doing a VR project or an AR project, there's certain templates for that. And, you know, there's certain things for cinematics, mobile. We're just going to use the most kind of basic one, which is 3D Core. And on the right, we can set where we want to create this project. I'm going to go ahead and click on the folder icon and find the folder that I created, which again was in my class folder. And I called Unity Project Class. I'll select that folder. So that's the pathway that I have. And then we'll call this project Unity Class project. Why not? And I'll hit create project. So I see the game engine launch. It's going to open up, and then we'll take a look at the interface. Now, at this point, you guys, you know, you've worked with 3 or 2 other game engines. The Fortnite Creative, which was very visual and didn't really involve too complicated of coding, so you focused more on game design. But the second one, the Unreal Engine that you've been doing for quite a few weeks now, was much more technical. You created some more custom type of game experiences, levels in that, and it was harder to do, but it was more unique, and you can do more with that. This one is going to be similar to that, so you're going to see a lot of the same concepts, and we're going to do the same kind of things in it. In fact, we could make the exact same level that we made in Unreal Engine, or similar to it. And you would see the difference between these 2 game engines, how they work, because they're each better at some things and not so good at other things. And so if you have a project, you may decide which game engine to use based on what you want to do in the project. It's not that Unreal Engine is just better than Unity. It's not. I mean, Unity is quite honestly probably the most popular game engine in the world. Unreal Engine is close to that. They're competing with Unity and almost surpassing it, but in some areas they definitely are surpassing it, and you definitely want to use Unreal Engine for certain things. So it's good to know the foundations of games in both, and not just games, but any interactive media experience. We're kind of doing games, but it's just interactive media experience. It may be a game or it may not be a game. So you're going to notice similar things in this engine. It's going to have some kind of hierarchy for your 3D world that you're going to build. And it's going to have something for the project in the bottom here. And on the right, it's going to have like a details panel where when you select different things, it shows you the details of that. Only they call it an inspector. So they borrow a lot from each other. And you're gonna notice that even the interface kind of looks a little similar. The Unreal Engine 5 interface looks similar to the Unity interface in a lot of ways. 4 looked pretty different, but they kind of are getting closer and closer together. So what we want to do in here is look at some of the things that Unreal Engine can do to create a basic 3D world and scene, and the interaction that we looked at or we did inside of the other game engine. So your 3D world, what you are going to notice is that the axes are different, in that in Unreal Engine they use Z up, and in here they use Y up, similar to programs like Maya. And but you have all the same tools. You've got manipulators and gizmos that you can do your W, ER keys to rotate, scale, and move whatever it is you have that you want to adjust in your world. You've got moving around in the window. Your Alt key works in here too. Left mouse button allows you to orbit around. Right mouse button is going to be like a zooming type of thing. You can also use your wheel. And you can frame things too by hitting the F key. It'll frame whatever you have selected. So it's sort of centered in your 3D view. You have a scene view and you have a game view as tabs here. And I want to go in and import some of those assets that we have. So I want to import the standard assets because if you look at the bottom here, this bottom area, you can see it's your project area down here. There's a project tab, and then there's a console tab, which will show you error messages and other things as they come up. The project tab has packages in it, and these are things that the engine is using, and it could be stuff that you would want to access, but a lot of these packages are more in the background that you won't access them directly necessarily. Your packages and other things, assets that you're going to bring in, are going to come in this assets folder. And there's one folder in there now that's kind of a user folder created for you called scenes. And that the sample scene there is what you're looking at. So we're in the sample scene right now. If we save, it's going to save to that sample scene. If we want to create our own scene, a new scene, we're going to do a save as, and we're going to save it in there. So let's just do that first. Let's do a file, save as, and make sure you're pointed at your scenes folder, or double click into your scenes folder. And let's just save here something to get started with. So let's do Unity scene start. And we'll just, you can put like a 1 or something, but actually start is probably a good descriptive thing to know. If we look at this, this is the first one that we did. And we're saving that as a Unity scene file, and you can see it comes up with the Unity symbol on it. And whenever we do a save now, it's going to go into that one. So we have this original one that will always be there in case you need to start over again. Okay, so what I want to do is, I noticed that I have a directional light in here and a main camera. I want to bring in my standard assets. They're going to come up underneath my, sort of underneath my scenes folder here in my assets. And to do that, across the top, you have your file menu. This is where you're going to do your save and save as. Then you have edit, and then the third one is assets. And assets is where we're going to import everything into our Unity scene. So let's go, and we're going to import a package, and it's going to be a custom package. And just go and find the one that you downloaded. Mine is in this folder here, Unity project class folder, and there it is, standard assets fixed. I'm going to open that. Now, when I open it, it's going to come up as a bunch of folders and stuff to import. And when you import packages, you don't have to import everything in the package. You could just choose things. You can see that by default here, everything is selected. It'd be the same as hitting this all button. You could say none if you only wanted one thing, and then go find the thing that you want and just click on and check it. But we want everything here, so go ahead and import that into your scene. So this standard assets package is something that I downloaded from the store. I don't think it's available to you guys to download because I've had it. I actually downloaded it into my assets a long time ago. And since then, I think they removed it because they've added some new ones. But like I said, there's some things in here that I actually like that I think are work a little better, or not better. I just prefer the aesthetics of them, of the first-person controller to the new one that they have in the store. You could download the new one in the store if you wanted to. It probably works similar to the one that I'm going to show you, but my code and stuff is really based on this controller, and there might be some changes that you would have to do if you wanted to use the newer controller. And I'll show you in a minute why I like it better. So once it goes through importing, you should see a new standard assets folder. And actually, there's a bunch of new folders in here now. There's a My Materials folder. Oh, really? Huh. I don't know why it, oh, okay. All right, so when this standard assets folder, I brought it in and I had to fix some things in this version. I was getting some error messages, so there was a script that I had to go fix. And so I wrapped up the package from inside of my scene, and I had checked dependencies on it. And apparently it was dependent on a few things from my scene, my test scene that I was doing, which actually brought in all of my scripts and sample scenes. As well as the standard assets and this variety pack here, which I'm not even sure if that's going to have anything in there because I really didn't use that much. So, and it's got a couple of materials from Quixel Bridge that I imported as well. It doesn't matter. Those files are fine. If you later on don't want them, you can always delete them out of there. I don't think that they're not really, shouldn't be there, aren't critical to using the standard assets. So if you got this too, then it actually did something for you that that I wasn't really I was going to have you do manually, like import those scripts, but maybe you don't have to now that if they're in here, if it made a My Scripts folder for you and imported the scripts, then that's a step you don't have to do. So we'll check these scripts and see if they're actually all there and look okay. Because it might be an older version actually of some of these scripts. Actually, you know what? Yeah, let's delete these scripts. I'm going to delete these scripts because I think I did change a couple of things, add a few things to one of these scripts at least, and these are probably old versions. So let's just select this My Scripts folder, and we're just going to delete it and manually bring them in. Delete selective asset, yes. Okay. So that should be fine. We'll deal with those scripts in a little while. I just don't want you to have an older version, so then it might be confusing. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to create a ground plane here. I'm going to, similar to Unreal Engine, there is a sort of a plus symbol here that allows me to add things to my scene. So there's two, notice this before we actually add anything. There's a plus symbol with a drop-down arrow right here on the upper part where it says hierarchy. And it's got things like 3D objects, lights, and UI and cameras and all things that would go in your scene. Down here, you have another plus symbol with a drop down next to project, and that's for adding things to your project level. So things like folders and C# scripts and materials. So that's gonna add things over here. So for instance, I could select assets, which is the top level, and I could go to the plus symbol here where project is, go to folder, and then type in My Scripts, no spaces in the name. I'm capitalizing the M and capitalizing the S. This is, there's some syntax that we're going to use in Unity that I've used before, but it becomes more critical in Unity because we're going to be scripting. And scripting requires that you have a certain syntax and that you are consistent with that syntax. And so when I don't put spaces in my names that I create, that actually becomes more critical in here, especially when we get to the coding part of it. So I would go ahead and get used to it, as I mentioned before, and don't put spaces in your names, even on your folders and stuff. And when I make an object, I capitalize the first letter and any additional first letters of additional words in there. When I'm doing things like variables and other things inside of a script, I use something called camel case, which starts lowercase and any additional words get uppercased. And it is an actual thing in scripting that if you use camel case, the computer can read it and it will break those words apart when it shows them to you in the editor and put spaces in and capitalize that first letter. But only if you use the correct syntax. If you don't, then it's not going to understand it. So there's times when we get coding that's going to be important that you're consistent about that. I'm consistent about doing it this way with my names. I always put uppercase on the beginning, no spaces, and uppercase on new words. That is not critical. Like, that's a preference of mine personally. If you don't do that, it's not going to break your program, as long as, you know, if you're referencing a folder in your script, you actually put the correct name. But that's what I do. It's not required for naming folders. So I've got a MyScripts folder now here that I can use, and we're going to want other things like there's a My Materials folder already here. We're going to want materials. I would probably want also models. So I could call it My Models. And you don't, I'm putting this my on everything. You could just put models and materials. But what you're going to notice is you bring packages in, there's going to be other models folders, and there's going to be other materials folders. And if you name your custom materials folder My Materials, you know where your custom materials are, right? If you name it materials, there's going to be bunches of materials folders in there, and you might mix them up or have a hard time finding it. So that's why I think putting something on there like a prefix, as I'm doing here, might make it easier to find. It also places them next to each other in the list of hierarchy of folders here. So let's create something up. We're going to go to the plus symbol up next to the hierarchy, and I want to create a 3D object, and I'm going to make a plane. And just create that plane. Go look at your details or your inspector, and you're going to see the transform numbers for that plane, the position in X, Y, Z. Mine got placed a little bit down in Z. If I want to have it right in the middle of my world at 0, it's a little bit up in Y, a little bit, towards, away from me in Z. So Z is the blue axis, away is negative, positive is towards you. I want this to be right in the middle of the world. Now I could type in 0, 0, 0, or you can go to these 3 dots here and hit reset. And that's going to pop it to the default center of the world, 0, 0, 0 position. Okay, we can use our Alt and left mouse button you can also use your right mouse button without Alt to drag to center that up, or you could hit F key on your keyboard to center it up in your view. You can also click up here on this little gizmo in the upper right corner. If I click the green or Y axis, I'll be looking down at my plane. If I click the X one, I'll be looking from the front, and I can hardly see it. So, all of these can speed up your interaction. Now I'm holding Alt down and using my left mouse button to orbit. So I'm going to go over here and let's just put, let's put 50 by 50 by 50 to create a fairly large plane here. And I'm going to go down to the plus symbol where the project is. And I'm going to actually, I'm going to double click into My Materials folder. Does everybody have a My Materials folder? Okay, I'm inside of My Materials folder now. I double clicked into it. And I'm going to go to the plus symbol where project is and choose material. It's about halfway down. I'm going to create a material. I'm going to call it ground underscore MAT for material. And again, that's a convention that, I mean, of a personal preference of mine. You don't have to give it that name, but I usually do put MAT on my materials if it's a custom material. And I can see in my inspector that I have the material properties here, and I'm going to click on the color swatch to create sort of a brown sort of light brown ground. You can click into the middle here and drag around. You can use your wheel to go to different color areas. And I'm going to just close that and drag with the middle mouse button, drag that material onto that ground plane. Okay, so I assign that material to that ground. If I select the ground, I will see that the material is there in the properties at the bottom. Let's create another 3D object. I'm going to go to my plus symbol near the hierarchy again, go to 3D object. I'm going to create a cube. And I'm going to notice that cube, if I use my wheel to zoom in, that cube is kind of halfway into the ground. It's a 1 by 1 by 1 cube. It's in the center of the world. I can see in my transforms. And probably if I were to type in the y-axis 0.5, then it would be sitting right on the ground because it looked like it was halfway down in the ground. It was created in the center of this cube, right where the center of the ground plane is, and so it was halfway down. So now I know it's sitting right there on the ground with 0.5 in the y. And I can see that I have a shadow, which I could select my directional light. We've had a directional light inside of Unreal Engine 2, and you should know that that kind of light doesn't matter if you move it. You can put it anywhere because the only thing that matters on it is the rotation. And if I were to hit the E key, select that directional light and hit the E key and rotate, I can adjust the shadow on this object. I can. And actually, if you were to orbit a little bit so you can see the sky, and you do the red one so it's kind of lengthening the shadow, you're going to notice the sun going down. So that is a skybox, a sort of a basic skybox that is using the directional light for the positioning of a procedural sun. Okay, so and let's try this. Let's select your cube again. Hit the W key to move it. You should see your move tool. Let's pull it up into the air a little bit, and then hit the E key to rotate it, and rotate it so it's kind of gonna have the edge pointed towards the ground. So there's an edge pointed towards the ground. Now, if we look at this cube object that we created, we will see in the inspector that it has a box collider on it. And that box collider is the exact same size as the cube. It's a basic collider, so it doesn't use too much memory because it's a simple shape. And what we want to do is we want to add something to this. Now, when you want to add something to a property, to an object, a game object inside of Unity, you add components. It's a big button at the bottom of the inspector. And we want to add a physics component to this. So I'm going to click on Add Component, and I'm going to find Physics and click on that. And then I have a bunch of properties I can choose here. I want rigid body. I'm going to add a rigid body component to this cube. And you can see it comes up below the box collider. And it's got things on it like mass and drag and gravity. turned on by default. So now if I want to see how this cube reacts with this rigid body on it, I can play the game mode. So there's a big play button, just like in Unreal Engine. That's how we're going to run the simulation. And if I hit play here, I'm going to see it compile, and then the cube drops to the ground and moves a little bit because it hits on its edge and settles. Now there is no, if you hit escape, it's not going to stop the simulation in here. You have to hit the play button again. Don't hit the stop button. The stop button is not a stop button. It's a pause button. And it's used for debugging. It allows you to pause the game simulation while you try out something new. But when you eventually do stop or hit the play button again, everything you did is lost, right? You can test things out with the pause button on, but when you eventually do hit the play button again and stop the simulation, all of that stuff goes away. It does not get saved. So, you're not going to use the pause button very often unless you're trying to debug something usually. Okay, so we have physics on there. I want to show you why I wanted the standard assets. There is inside of the standard assets, let's open that up. So you'll go to your project outliner and find where it says standard assets, and it's got a little arrow next to it. Open that arrow by clicking on it, and then go down until you find characters and open that arrow so that you see inside you have a first-person character and a third-person character and a rollerball. Click on the first-person character arrow and open that up, and you'll see you have a prefabs folder. Click on the prefabs folder, and you'll see you have a first-person controller prefab asset, FPS controller prefab asset, and a rigid body FPS controller prefab asset. We're going to use the FPS controller prefab asset, not the rigid body one. And so a prefab in Unity is like a blueprint in Unreal. Blueprints, when we create an actor blueprint, we put static meshes in it and colliders and some graph stuff, and all of that stuff is in a blueprint. This is like an actor blueprint. Well, it's more like a character blueprint for an FPS controller. It has a bunch of stuff in it, and we're going to make prefabs, and you'll see that it's kind of like making an actor blueprint. And so we're going to pull this FPS controller with your left mouse button, click on it and drag it into your scene, and drop it somewhere near the center of your world or not too far from the cube. And what you're going to notice if I hit F to frame that is that I'm kind of down into the ground here. It's like placing my capsule collider for this FPS controller down in the ground. So I'm going to want to switch to my move tool and drag it up. It doesn't give you the same error message that it does inside of Unreal Engine when you do that. You get a little error message if your character's down in their capsule colliders in the ground. It doesn't give you that in here, but you will fall through the ground. Or you'll get stuck in the ground. So you want to pull it up above the ground plane And if we look, there's multiple objects in this FPS controller. If we go to it and open it up by clicking the little arrow next to it, you'll see that you have the controller, which has the parent one, which has the collider on it. It's got some scripts in the right-hand side in the details. You see it's got an audio source, it's got a rigid body, it's got a first-person controller script, and then the child, which is first-person character, is actually a camera. So that's the camera you're looking through on that first-person controller. If I hit play, and actually, before I hit play, let's go to the game view. So you have your scene view, you have your game view. There's some things over here that you can turn on, which you probably don't have turned on. You probably have play focused on. Mine's on play maximized because that's a sort of a Unity global preference. So I put it on play maximized in my other project, and it's remembered it in this project. So you might want to turn that on, play maximized. And what that does is it just makes it full screen whenever you hit play to run your simulation. And it'll come back to being not full screen automatically. So just check that and make sure that play maximized is on. Go back to your scene view and hit play. And what you should see is you should be able to look around with your camera, and then I should be able to walk. Well, let me just face the cube so we can tell what's going on. So if I walk towards it, you can see that there's a little head bob. And I get some sounds. And the reason that sound went off is because actually, once you bring, I'm going to turn my simulation off, click the play button again. Once you bring the controller into your scene, you have to delete your main camera that was in your scene to begin with, because they have something called an audio listener on them, and there's only supposed to be one of those in the scene. And if you have two of them in the scene, it'll start doing weird things. And that's why my footstep sounds were going away, because the audio listeners in the main camera is messing it up. So I want to select my main camera over in my hierarchy and just hit delete. Don't delete your FPS controller camera, just the main camera, hit delete. And now I'll hit play again. And I actually can hear the footsteps louder. Let's walk backwards and forwards. Let's jump. And that's one of the reasons why I like this FPS controller, is because it's got the head bob and it's got the footstep sounds. And to me, that's more immersive than the other controller, which is basically just silent, and it doesn't have any bobs, so you're just basically flying through your scene. Some people like that on an FPS game. I don't. I prefer to have something where it feels like I'm actually walking. And I do think that the head bob helps with that, and the footstep sounds. So all that's built into this controller, and we're going to use that. We used a third-person controller for the last one. We're going to use a first-person controller for this one, for this project. Okay, so I've got my FPS controller in there, and I've got my a few different objects and things. Let's go ahead and do a file save on this. And I want to I want to look at a script next. So let's do something quick here. I want to take the cube that I have. And so I've got it up there. I'm just going to reset it so it pops back down. And then I'm going to type in 0.5 to the Y again to put it right back up on the surface. Make sure that it's on the surface. Like, this is actually going to matter now. So I want to create multiple cubes. Then I'm going to create something to shoot out of my FPS controller at those cubes. I'm going to create a wall and I'm going to shoot at the wall. And we're going to do that through some of it through code. The shooting part anyway. So to create a wall here, I've got this cube and there's not much on it right now. We could put a material on it and yeah, why don't we do that? We'll add a material to it. So go to your materials folder again. Let's go to the project menu where the plus sign is. We're going to create another material. Let's call this cube_mat. And for this one, let's just see. I'm going to click where it says albedo. I'm going to click on the little dot next to the name. There's a little dot there. There's a little space here and there's a little dot. I'm going to click next to the name. And that's going to show me texture maps that I could put into my albedo, which is the main color map for this object or for this material. I actually haven't put the material on the object yet. And we can see if we have any materials in here that look like they might look good on a cube. For instance, we have this cliff albedo. It's probably not great, but we could try it. So I'm going to click on cliff albedo, or actually double click it, and it'll plug it in to this. And actually we do have a normal map here. So I'm going to go down to where it says normal map, and normal map is the bumpiness on an object. And it's a 3-channel map that will control sort of highlights and stuff on the surface. And I want to click on the little dot next to that. And we'll go to that cliff one again. And I can see it has a normal map. So I'm going to double click that to get the normal map too. That'll just give it a little bit better look. And then I'm going to drag it onto my cube. We could hit play to go take a look at that and see what it looks like. It looks pretty good. All right, so I'll turn that off. Now you might want to select your FPS controller and move it a little bit in your scene. If it's too close to your cube like mine is, I'm going to move it this way, sort of down the Z-axis. And then I'm going to rotate it, hit E for rotation. I'm going to rotate it around, let's say 90 degrees. And if I click on the camera, I can see which way it's looking. Actually, it's looking this way over here. So let me go ahead and grab the FPS controller again and actually go like that. 180 degrees. Sorry, not 90 degrees. I should have done 180. And And if I look, I can see the camera is looking at the, now don't mess your camera up. I'm selecting the camera to look at it, but I'm not rotating the camera. I'm not moving the camera on my FPS controller. I've had people do that before and they mess their FPS controller camera up. I mean, you can always, this is, when you dragged the prefab into the scene, the prefab is like the master object. And when you drag it into the scene, you get an instance of that master object. So if you mess it up, you just delete it and drag another one in. It's fine. It's not going to break the game, in other words. I can see a little star on my Unity scene start. Let's go and do a file save. This star means that we haven't saved. Now I should be looking directly at my cube, which I wanted. And then I'm going to go ahead and select this cube, make sure my W key is on, and I'm going to duplicate the cube. And so I'm going to, you can go to Edit, Duplicate. Or Control D if you want to speed things up a little bit. Control Z is undo in here. And then I'm going to move it to the side and just place one sort of next to it, but don't overlap them. It's kind of important you don't overlap them. And then I'll actually, let me delete that one for a second. Before I duplicate it, I want to make this into a prefab because I've done some things on it and I may want to change them all. And if I duplicate it, I'm not really going to be changing them all because they won't be an instance of a master object. So to make something into a prefab, I want you to go down to your project assets folder, right click, create a new folder, create folder, and name it my prefabs. And double click into it. Find your cube object up in your hierarchy outliner. Drag it with the left mouse button from the hierarchy outliner down into your My Prefabs folder. And it will make a prefab out of it. The cube turns blue. Anything that's blue in your hierarchy is an instance of a prefab. Okay, so I just made a prefab of the cube so that if I ever want to change all my cubes, I can just do it on this prefab object and it'll propagate to all the other cubes. All right, so I could drag in another cube or I could duplicate the one that's already in here. It's still going to be a prefab, so, or an instance of a prefab. So again, I'll do a Control D to duplicate. I see that I have a cube one. I'll drag it over and let's just make a few cubes here. Now, if you go to the plus symbol up near the hierarchy, there is the first thing in the list is create empty. If I create an empty, it's a game object that has no nothing but a center. So it's just a center. And it's used for things like organizing groups of objects, for hierarchies of various kinds. So I could call this something like cubes group or something like that. And I could reset it so it goes to the center of the world. And that's going to be at the base of my cubes. So if I want it to be more centered, I could move it over here, like somewhere around there. And then I could take these cubes that I made and shift select them over in the hierarchy, hold shift down and select the first one, hold shift down and select the last one. And then I could drag all those cubes with the left mouse button on top of cube group. And now they're child to that. Yeah. You have to do it from over here in your hierarchy to this area down here that is inside of your folder. Don't try to drag it from the 3D view. And use the left mouse button. There's a lot of dragging things onto objects inside of this program. It's kind of like the most efficient way of doing it. And did it work? Let me take a look. Probably you put some kind of material that's not really supposed to be on that type of object. Well, okay, so close it. So it's not on the object, it's on the material. So you have to select the material. Don't double click it, it's not good. This program is different in that you don't double click materials and stuff to open them up like you do in Unreal Engine. You just click on them once and look in the inspector and you can do everything there. So it's in the albedo that you put the cliff. It's only going to come up because it's a texture map. You have to click there and then go find the so go up, go somewhere close to where that is. Try this one. All right, and double click it. All right, it's in there. It should come up on here. And let me just make sure you don't have any other ones loaded. And there is a normal on it as well. So you can go to normal, and that one has one on. No, that's not the one. Click onto it again. Normal map of blue. So that's what I did. Okay. And then yeah, you can drag it. Yeah, it's on there. I can see it. So it's fine. And then it is an instance. You must have made an instance out of it because it's blue. You have where's your prefabs for? Okay, delete that one. Okay, drag this cube onto there again. Right, it's blue. I don't know why it's coming up red there. Maybe because you broke the connection before you did it. But I think it's fine. I mean, select it. Yeah, everything looks fine. Control D, or edit duplicate. No, that's not what I did. So I duplicated it and I moved it a little bit and made another one. Delete that. Go to your, the one you just made, delete it. Go to this one. Okay, move it. No, don't, when you move it, grab an arrow. Yeah, so you can move it just in that one axis. And then, yeah, that one looks fine. Try duplicating again. Okay. So, so I've got 4 cubes there, and I've parented them underneath my empty. So I created an empty, and I selected them and dragged them onto there. I could have done them one at a time, but I know that it's parented because they're indented in. You know, and we've seen that before in other programs too. So it's a common industry standard for parenting in an outliner to indent it in like this. And then if I want another row on top, I'm just going to select the parent, the cubes group, and Control D, duplicate. And now I have a second group. And if I grab the green arrow and move it, I can move that whole group up. So now I have another one. And I'm going to put it slightly above the first one. Don't leave much of a gap, but don't overlap them either. All right, so I just duplicated a group. I'm going to Control D, duplicate the group again, and pull it up. Now there's physics on this cube. So if I hit play, I'm going to see that physics kick in, and I saw all of those cubes sort of fall onto each other and wobble a little bit. If you put them inside of each other, the colliders will cause them to explode and they'll fall down. If you put them too high up above, they might fall down and hit and wobble too much and fall down. So I wanted to just place them right above there so that when the physics kicks in, they're going to just settle onto each other. Now I could go ahead and hit play again, and I could create another group node. I'm gonna go up to my hierarchy and create another empty. I'm going to reset its transforms so it pops back to the center. I can leave it where it is because I'm just going to move it up, but if I wanted to, I could adjust it a little bit so that it's in the center of this group. I do want it kind of at the bottom though, because what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to double click that game object, or actually go to your inspector and rename it there. I'm going to call this one, instead of game object, I'm going to call it wall and hit enter. All right, now I have a group node that I'm going to take all of these other groups. So I have 3 groups here. I'm going to shift select all of those groups with my left mouse button and drag all of those groups onto the wall object. And now they're child to the wall. All I'm doing is parenting in a hierarchy. This is a basic 3D thing when you're working on a 3D program. This is a fundamental that you guys want to understand, because this is how you make more complex objects, is by parenting them together. So, you know, try to, if anything's unclear, make sure you ask me. Yeah.
How'd you make the game object again?
It's the first thing in hierarchy, create empty. So we're not going to use empties a lot, but we will use them occasionally. Now, once I have that, let's say I want to put this wall up a little higher. So now I can take that wall node and I can move the whole thing up, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a platform for these. So I'm going to go and hit the plus symbol again. I'm going to create a 3D object, a cube, and I'm going to move it up. And then I'm going to scale it. I'm going to hit the R key to get to scaling. I'm going to scale it in X out, maybe in Y down a little bit. And then in Z, I want to scale it out a little bit too, like it's a platform. So I made this platform and I'll just move it under the wall, and maybe I'll select the wall and just zoom in a little bit. I'll frame it, F for framing. And I want to just move the whole wall down a little bit because when it settles, I don't want it to fall too far. But I don't want to move it into the platform because then that would cause them to repel each other, and I don't want that to happen. So it just needs to be right above the platform. And I can test it out. Let's hit play and see if the wall settles onto the platform, the floating platform. And I can see that it did. It's on the floating platform. Now, the reason it's floating is because I didn't put any rigid body physics on the platform. So it's going to stay where I put it. But the blocks have that. And this is like the booby trap that I did in Unreal Engine. You know, I put a bunch of ice blocks on top of a platform, then I deleted the platform and they fell. So I'll probably do something similar with this later on. But I just wanted to make a floating platform that I could shoot. So now I'm going to do the shooting part. So what we have in our scripts is a shooter script. And I had you delete the script, so I'm going to go to my scripts folder, and I want to go find the scripts that I downloaded because I know those are the latest scripts. So they were the Unity starter scripts that I unzipped, and I have them unzipped, and here they are. There's 5 scripts. I'm going to go ahead and shift select all of those 5 scripts in the Windows folder, and I'm going to drag them into the My Scripts folder inside of Unity. So I'm just going to left mouse button, drag them in there and drop them in the folder. And I'll see them come up in the folder. Now I have the scripts in the My Scripts folder. And the first one we're going to look at is this shooter script. So to look at it, you select the shooter script. Then you're going to see it in your inspector, but that's not where we edit it. That you can look at to just quickly check it to see if it's the right script that you want to open. But you open it at the top where it says open. And what that's going to do is it's going to open up Visual Studio. Now, we tested this on several of the machines out there. And Scott was supposed to make sure that Visual Studio opens on all these machines. If it's not opening, then that means there's a problem with that machine. So do not create an account. When it gives you that message, you want to skip for now. I use the light one. You can use whatever one you want, blue, black, dark, or light. I like the light one. It looks like the one that's on the screen there. I think it's a little bit easier to read. Okay, so this isn't a typing class, so I'm not going to have you type all this stuff in on your own, because honestly, you're going to have typos and it won't work. Probably. It happens. And the main thing is that you're going to hopefully understand how these scripts are working enough to make your own scripts later on. So this actually, it might be useful to go back to Unity for a second before we talk about that script. I want you to go into the open area of your My Scripts folder, right click, go to Create, and C# script. And I want you to just name it My Script. No spaces. Capital M, capital S. Just My Script. Enter. And after you do that and it processes, hit open again on that one. Okay, so this is what's in a basic Unity script, C# script. So these are the main parts of it. And there is really 4 parts here to talk about. The first part is the very top, where it says using system collections generic and using Unity Engine. Now, these are all using what's called classes. It's groups of different keywords and commands and stuff that are going to be for certain things that you want to do. Could be physics, could be various parts of a game. And all of this stuff is stored in the program in this using Unity Engine, using system collections. All of that needs to be in there to have access to all the stuff that is in Unity coding. So you need those 3 lines in there. You don't ever mess with those 3 lines. You might add to those 3 lines. You might add another line about UI, for instance, like a GUI reference, because actually the GUI stuff is not in those 3 things. These are for basic 3D type of operations. So those 3 lines, you don't mess with them, you leave them there. The way C# works is that a line of code is always terminated with a semicolon. So when you see semicolon at the end of a lot of these lines, that's the end of a regular line of code. Now, when you don't see it, like for where it says public class, and like that grayed out part that says Unity script 0 references, that's something that Visual Studio's adding. It's not actually even part of the script. If you look back at the script, that's not even in there. But the public class My Script mono behavior, that's actually that's our script made into a class. So we gave it a name, My Script, and it's declaring that as its own class that is something that can be referenced by other scripts. And mono behavior is just that's sort of Unity's coding language. Like it's C#, but it's a Unity C#, and they call it mono behavior. It's been around for a long time. And then, so that line does not have any semicolons because it's actually it's at a class level, and class is not a like declaring a class is not a line of code. It's done in a different way, and it's done with these curly brackets. So you always have the name of the class and the type and mono behavior, and then you have an opening curly bracket and a closing curly bracket at the end. And then inside of that, you have what's called procedures or functions, that one of them is called start and the other one's called update. And start is like on begin in the on begin node in Unreal. It's what happens at the beginning of your game. Everything that's inside of start is going to be what occurs at the beginning of your Unity game. And then update is like the on tick node. And so that runs with the game loop continuously. All right, so you want something to happen continuously in your game, you put it in update. You want something to happen at the beginning of your game, you put it in start. And there's other ones, but these are like the most basic ones. And they don't have anything in them here. And scripts in Unity are attached to objects in your scene. So in order for this script to actually do anything, I have to attach it to an object in my scene. It could be an empty, or it could be an actual game object of some kind. This one is just the template for doing a script. There's nothing in here actually happening. And functions or procedures, I usually use the name procedures. Some people would call them functions. I think they're the same thing. It just depends on your coding background. They always have the name, which in this case is start. Void means that if you see void, that means that there is nothing going out, no data is coming out of this procedure. So when it gets run, it's not going to spit out anything. There's parentheses after the name, and that's for putting inputs into the procedure. If there's nothing there, then there's no inputs to the procedure. And then you're going to have an opening curly bracket and a closing curly bracket. Now, where people get messed up in their coding is that they lose track of their curly brackets, because every opening curly bracket has to have a closing curly bracket. And you try to line them up like this so that you can find them. If you don't, you will get an error message. Your whole game won't run because of that error. And you'll have to come in and find it using these line numbers. When you get the error message, usually it tells you the line number that it's close to inside the script. So a lot of that you still had inside of Unreal Engine, but it was just different. It wasn't something that you could look at like this. The nice thing about scripting is that if you can read a script, if you know what the parts are, it's pretty easy to just look at it and see what it's doing. And the flow that you had with the nodes in Unreal Engine, that's an up to down flow here. So going from top to bottom, just like we read from left to right for each line as it goes down. So it always runs the script from top to bottom, left to right, each line. Now, if we look at the shooter script now, we've got the same 3 lines at the top. We have public class shooter, so that's the name of the script. One thing that you need to know about scripting in Unity the name of the file has to be the same name as the class inside of it. So if my file's named shooter, the class inside of it better be shooter with exactly the same casing. If you have to change the name of your files for some reason, you've got to come in here and change the name of your class because they don't change automatically. And your script will not run if they have different names and class names and file names. So that's important to remember that. And what you're seeing with all this green is what's called comments. When you start scripting, we did comments in Unreal by hitting the C, by selecting some nodes and hitting C and typing in something. In here, you do it by putting a /* and then a */ at the end of the comment if it's multiple lines. But you'll see that most of mine are not multiple lines. They're only single lines because usually it saves stuff pretty briefly. And if you put enough of them in, it makes more sense. So I don't use the block comment very often. I don't do the /* very often, but you can use it for big comments at the beginning of your script. But usually I use these line comments, which are 2 // and anything after that is going to be commented out because it runs left to right. And you can even put them out to the side. Now, I didn't really do that in this script, but if I wanted to comment on every one of these variables, I could go and put 2 / here and say public or plug in your rigid body object that you want to shoot. Because that's what that particular variable is for. I probably should have commented that. So this is your area for your variables. I always put them at the top of the script because it's easier to find them. If they're being made throughout the script, then it's a lot harder to find them than if you put them all in a group at the top. And so the variables for this particular script is we need some kind of projectile to be plugged into it. This is for shooting. We need a speed that you want to shoot the object, maybe some kind of shooting sound. And you need to play a sound, the sound clip, you're going to need an audio source of some kind. And that's what my variables are here. And there are various types. So rigid body is actually an object that has a rigid body added to it, like we did with the cube. Float is, of course, a decimal, and we're using that for a speed. And when you write a float, if you actually put the float in there, you have to put a dot, some kind of decimal, and an F at the end. So 35.2 F, whatever you want to put, that has to be written like that. The name of the clip, I'm just naming shoot sound, and here I'm using camel case. In a lot of these, I'm using camel case. Starting lowercase, uppercase, the next word in it, don't put any spaces. And when it's processes and these come up in the editor as variables that you can plug in, it puts the space and it capitalizes that first letter. So that's how you write it. Audio source, that's a variable to hold the audio source that we're going to grab off of the object that we put this on. So this script, it says, well, actually, it doesn't say. This script goes on the FPS controller. It kind of says it in that first block, but this script needs to be put on your FPS controller camera. I pointed out the camera. That's where you want this script to go. So let's do that. We've got that script in our scene. We've looked at it. We'll look at it some more. Let's go back and put it on so we can see how it works first. So I did some changes. I added a comment here. I'm going to go ahead and hit the little floppy disk to save that back to Unity. And if I go back to Unity, and if I select the shooter script, I should see that comment in there. There it is. And I want to attach this script to my first person camera right here. Now, to do that, select your first person camera. If you haven't opened it up, open up your FPS controller, find the camera. When you have the camera selected, you know because it shows you the view of the camera. So you know that's your camera. And then go to the bottom, add component, scripts, and choose shooter. And you'll see that the shooter script is added to the components, and there are now spaces for putting a projectile in that's of type rigid body and a sound that is of type audio clip. And it's got also a shoot speed that you could change. Okay, so I need a projectile. Let's make one real quick. I'm going to go and go to my plus symbol under hierarchy. I'm going to create another 3D object. This time it's going to be a sphere. I'm going to move this so it's a little easier for me to see. It doesn't matter where it is in the 3D view. I'm going to make this into a prefab. So it really doesn't matter where it is in the transforms. The main thing is I'm going to give it some kind of material so I can see it a little easier. So I'm going to go to the My Materials folder again, right click, create a material halfway down the list. I'm going to call this projectile underscore mat. I'm going to click on the color, choose some bright color like pink. I'll make a pink projectile. It's like a paintball. And I'm going to pull the metallic all the way up and the smoothness down a little bit. So I get this very shiny metallic looking pink ball. And then I'm going to drag that with my left mouse button, that material, from my materials folder onto my projectile object. Select your projectile object, your sphere, in the 3D view or over in your hierarchy outliner. And let's rename it. Let's call it projectile. And I want to add to it a rigid body. So I'm going to go to add components at the bottom. Physics. And choose rigid body. So I now have a rigid body with gravity on my projectile. If I want to test it, I'll hit play, and I should see it just fall to the ground. And it's going to be really boring because there's nothing on it. So that's fine. It worked. It's on the ground. So I know that gravity and everything's kicking in. And then I'm going to go to my prefabs folder, and I'm going to drag that projectile from the my prefabs, or from the hierarchy with the left mouse button, drag it from the hierarchy down to the my prefabs folder and drop it in. And it's there now. I don't know why it looks like it doesn't have the material, but the material is there. I can see it over here. Yeah, it might just be an update thing. We can hit the file save and yep, change colors. And now it's a prefab. I can see it's a prefab because it's blue in my hierarchy. So I know that it's works, it's a prefab. I can spawn it now. I'm gonna delete the one that's in my scene. Select it and delete it. Now there's no projectile in my scene, but it's down here in my prefabs folder. Has all the properties that I want for shooting it. Okay, let's shoot it. We'll plug that into our script that we have in our camera. So our FPS controller camera, select it again, go find the little space where it says my projectile, non-rigid body. Drag your projectile from the folder with your prefabs folder, left mouse button, drag it onto that space where it says non-rigid body, and it should plug in. Now it's going to shoot that projectile. The only other thing is I'd like a sound to happen. So let's take a look. I don't know if I have any appropriate sounds. Let me go to where it says shoot sound. We're going to click on the little dot next to it, and I'm going to see if there's any sounds that look like a shoot sound in here. So it doesn't look like I have a shoot sound in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to need to import some sounds. Let me go ahead and do that. Or actually, let's just go and find one on freesound.org. Okay, might as well do that. Make sure you save. And I'm going to go to freesound.org. I'm going to log in. And let's look for a shoot sound. Retro Pirate Cannon. Yeah, that's rifle gun. Okay. Retro bubble. Oh, I like that one. Okay, I'm gonna download that one. It's a WAV file. Let's go into it. I hit download. Let's go check my downloads folder. There it is, retro bubble shot. We'll go back to my Unity. I need a sounds folder, so I'm going to go to my assets, right click, create folder, and I'm going to make a my sounds folder. Going to go in there and drag the sound file from my downloads folder into the my sounds folder. I'll check the import settings. I don't think there's probably anything I need to do with this. It's a mono sound, it looks like. And there's not really anything I need to change on these default settings. So I'll go back to my first person camera. And where the space it says shoot sound, I'm going to drag this sound into it. You could also click the little circle and choose it there if it shows up. And let's try it. I'm going to hit play. Okay, I'm going to walk back a bit. And let's see if we can, I'm going to hit my left mouse button. Okay. Oh, you know what? I didn't hear the sound, and I know why. So I'm going to go back to my first person character camera, and there is no sound audio source on this object. There is an audio listener, but there's not an audio source. So I need to go to add component, audio, and choose an audio source. And I would go ahead and turn the play on awake off, because we're going to run it through the script, so we don't, there's actually no clip plugged in, so it won't do anything anyway, but I'm going to turn it off anyway. And then make sure you save, and let's try it again. Now we have an audio source. I'll back up here a little bit, and I want to kind of place these blocks. Since I don't have any sort of aiming thing, I'm just going to center it and click. All right, I want to get that one off of there. There we go. We knocked them all off. I'll probably change that shooting sound, but it's kind of fun to begin with anyway. But that's all happening from the script. So if we now go back and look at the script, we plugged in these variables here that say public. So when you put public in front of your variable inside of a Unity script, what it does is it creates something in the editor for you to actually see and edit. And in this case, it creates a space to plug in whatever kind of object it's looking for. A rigid body type object or an audio clip object in this case. When you are doing public float shoot speed and you put a number in there, then you get a number that you can adjust. So I can go back here, and if I decide, oh, well, it's really not shooting strong enough, let me go ahead and put in 50 and hit enter, and then play it again. And now if I shoot it, it's actually going to be much faster and greater, and it's going to have more force. Okay, so if I put 100, it would be really, really fast. Let's put 100. It might be so fast that it goes through the objects and they don't actually get affected. So if yeah, see right there, it went through them. And the reason it went through them is because it only registers the collision on a game loop. And what happened there was it went through the object in between a game loop. So it actually didn't have enough time to actually register the collision. So what you have to do if you're going to use a gun that's or some kind of projectile that shoots that fast is on your master object for the things that you're shooting. My cube, I would need to go in and find the collider, or actually the rigid body, and I would need to set the interpolation of that to to continuous dynamic, something like that, would force it to update faster. I might even want to do it on the this rigid body right here. The actually, that's probably better. Do it on the bullet itself, continuous dynamic. And the other thing that the other consideration with working with a rigid body is the mass. So do these two objects have the same mass? But maybe I want if I were to increase the mass of this bullet, it's going to have a harder time shooting it. But when it hits, it's going to really explode those objects because it's much higher. Like if I give this a mass of 10 and run it again, see how far those cubes are going? There's a lot more force happening out of that projectile now. Or more more force because there's a higher mass. So we're plugging in these things to the public variables. And then after we do that, it has to get the component of the audio source that I added in order to find it to play the clip inside of this script. So that is a get component command. And these are all part of the engine. Like it's like when you're searching for something in Unreal Engine, you type a little bit of the word get or something or the name, and it gives you the rest of it. You have the same thing that happens in here when you start typing. And you can see when I hover over it, it actually tells me how to use that particular thing, that command. So getting component audio source is a common thing that you would use to find an audio source. You save it inside of the audio source type variable called audio shoot source. And then down here, you play it with a play one shot. So when you start typing things in here, if you were actually typing this out, if I were to go to a new line here and type out audio, I get a list of things. Audio shoot source is the first one, so I can double click it. And then I can use dot syntax, dot. And then it will tell me a certain amount of things that I can do with that. So like we want to do there's different ways. If I just type in play, there's a play one shot, there's play delayed, play on getting tagged. There's a lot of different choices, play on a wait. We're doing a play one shot, which means just play the sound once. That's it. And then when you use this, when you use audio shoot source, it's going to tell you that it's looking for here. It tells you you're going to have play one shot, and then there's going to be some kind of, you have to define the clip. And that's where you're going to put your variable for the clip that you made at the top. So the shoot sound variable. And there's other ones that there's other what's called flags that you could add in there too. It says +1 overload. So there's other things you could add. Now all that is happening down here in update. So the start procedure is getting the component for the audio source. And then the update, which is running continuously, is looking for if you have if statement. So this is a conditional. And we've used conditionals. It's a branch inside of Unreal Engine. And we're looking at some kind of test. And we're looking at here, if input dot get button up fire 1 is true. So when you just put a reference like that, it always tests it to be true if it's inside the brackets of an if statement. You could say something equals to false, and it would test it for false, but by default, it's going to actually test it for true. And this is the code for the input of the left mouse button. It's called fire 1. And we'll look at all the inputs for you that you can use, but this is a really common one. And get button up is when I press the left mouse button, I let go of it. All right, so it's actually firing when I let go. There's a button down too. And I think the reason I used that was because you can't just hold it down, because you could just hold the button down and it would like keep shooting. This only shoots once each time. You have to like click it many times to get it to go more than once. And then if that's true, if you are holding down or you let go of the left mouse button, then it's going to run an instantiate command. So that's the command for spawning something in Unity. So we're spawning something here. And when you run an instantiate command, you have to put the rigid body, the vector that you want to move it on, and whatever. I mean, there's several things that you can add. But what I'm using here is my projectile that we're plugging in. So that's the rigid body. The transform that I want to do, or where you want it to start at. So in this case, it's starting where it says transform dot position. This is on the camera. It's starting at the camera position. And transform rotation means that it's taking the camera's rotation. So whatever this object is on, that's its transform position rotation. And as rigid body is what it's spawning as. Now, when it does that, it's catching the name right here into a variable called new shot. And that new shot, each time it instantiates something, it catches the name, it takes that object's name, and it runs a dot velocity syntax on it, which transforms it dot forward, which is actually the positive z, times the shoot speed, which we have at the top. Okay, and that actually makes it go forward at a certain rate. Velocity is built into the rigid body. Dot velocity is again built into the class of a rigid body. And that's what this object is. So that shoots it forward at a certain rate. This plays the sound. And this is just a line that I was typing just to show you what typing it in would look like. So that shouldn't be there. And you can see that I've commented the start of the if and the end of the if with the curly brackets. Conditionals are written in very similar way to procedures. If the input, which is in the parentheses, and then open curly bracket and curly bracket. Technically, it is a procedure. It's an if procedure. So there are else ifs, elses, and everything, which we will see in the scripts. This is just an if. If it's true, it's going to do it. If it's not true, it's not going to do anything. And that's the script. The other script that we might want to use is for this particular thing is the delete me script. When I'm playing this and shooting, if I those things are existing forever in my game. They will never go away. And they have physics on them, and the physics engine has to keep track of them till the game ends. So the more I shoot them, the more they are building up in memory, and eventually it's going to slow down my game because I'm just creating objects that are never going away. And they don't need to be there. Once I shoot, they can go away. So I have this delete me script, which will open up here. And it's a very simple script. It doesn't have anything in the update. All it has is that in the start, or it's got one public float variable called remove time. It's set to 3, which is basically 3 seconds. And then it's got in the start a destroy command. Game object means in a script, in a C# script like this, it's whatever game object refers to the object that this script is on. And so if you do this lowercase game object like that, there's no variable for that. That's just, it knows that that is the object that this script is on. And then remove time is the variable that I'm declaring up there. Semicolon to end that line. And the reason it's in the start is because this goes on the bullet, and when the bullet spawns, that is the start, and in 3 seconds, the bullet will disappear. It'll be destroyed. So we want to put this on the bullet, or the projectile. So I'll go find my prefabs folder, select the projectile, go back to my scripts folder, and you notice that this is a way of working in Unity that's, I think, maybe different than Unreal Engine, in the sense that I've got the projectile selected, so it's in the inspector, but I've selected another folder, but it's still in the inspector, because you need to be able to do that in order to drag stuff onto objects in the inspector. You need to be able to go to something else and then do the left mouse button drag. But if you left mouse button click on the object instead of drag, then you're going to switch the inspector, right? So you have to get used to, if you're doing all this sort of dragging stuff onto things, getting used to click and drag as opposed to click and stop, because it will make a difference how it comes up in the interface. So if I wanted to, I'm actually generally with scripts, I don't drag them onto the objects anyway. I could drag these scripts onto the objects up here, but instead I usually go to add component, scripts, and just look for the script name. I'm going to choose delete me. And then I can see it's on the bullet object, the projectile object. 3 seconds is the remove time. I'm going to go back and select my first person camera and set my shoot speed back down because it's too fast. I don't like it that fast. So let's put it back down to like 50. And I'll go ahead and run it. So now if I shoot something, I should see that disappear after 3 seconds. And I do see it disappearing back there. Just leave it up close here. Yep, disappearing. And if you decide 3 seconds is too short, you can always change it there in the outliner on the prefab itself. Or in the inspector, not outline, in the inspector. Okay, so I need you guys to check something. Go ahead and save everything. We're gonna wait till next time to get into the world building because there's a whole terrain build editor in here. But there are some things that I want you to sort of get prepared for that for Wednesday. So first thing, we have a basic skybox here for the world. I'm gonna want something more custom. I'm gonna want some kind of nicer skybox. If I go to window, rendering, lighting, window, rendering, lighting, and it opens up a floating window here. If I go to environment, I can find where the skybox is. And the skybox is currently set to sort of the default skybox. If I click on the little dot there, I can find maybe some other skybox, but there's not really much that comes in with the basic standard assets that I gave you. Yeah, I don't see really anything that came in here other than the basic one. So I'm going to want to bring in a nicer skybox. It's going to affect my lighting because you can see that the sun source is the source of my main lighting in here, but also the directional light is the sun source, and the environment lighting is based on the skybox. So it makes a huge difference what kind of skybox you bring in. We're going to bring in, we can bring in the skyboxes that we made for our Unreal Engine project. We can bring in anything that we make from that AI skybox editor that I showed you. So let's just see how that would look if I brought in a different skybox. And there's other ones out there that you can get. So I'm gonna make a new folder in my assets, right-click it, create folder, and I'm gonna call it, my skyboxes. And double-click into it, and then I'm gonna go find a skybox on my machine here. So let's see, we'll go into okay, so here I've got the one that I used from my game, the one that I created through the AI Skybox generator. I also have some other ones that I downloaded from a free trial of Adobe stock images. So they have bunches of really nice high-res skyboxes in there. So let's bring in one of those, and we'll also bring in, this one has a nice sky, so I'll bring that one in. And I'll also bring in the HDR one that I created and edited in Photoshop. Okay, so I have those two now in here. And the way I'm going to make them into a skybox is first you look at the import settings on these two images. You don't want a 2D shape for a skybox. You want a cube shape. And I would also usually clamp the skybox instead of wrap. You don't want to wrap the skybox. Clamp it, and I usually set the mapping to latitude, longitude, layout, cylindrical. If you're using the sort of cylindrical mapping that we saw kind of connects across the top and the bottom, you want to use the one that says latitude, longitude, layout. Okay, so latitude, longitude, layout, cube map for the texture shape. I've got I don't really have any alpha, so I'm not even going to worry about that. Clamp on under wrap mode. And for a skybox, normally you would only want max size, maybe 2048 for different objects that you bring in, or for regular image textures. For a skybox, which is much, much bigger, make sure that you put that up a little bit. I mean, check it to see what it is, but I would say don't go any lower than 4096. That's a 4K image for your background. Okay, and then I'll apply all that down here on the bottom where it says apply. And it's going to process it. And I believe it'll come out as a circle instead of a square image. And this is where you might hear some of your computers your fans start to take off. So you can see it's done and it's a circle. Now you don't put that directly. You can't put that directly onto your skybox. You have to create a material for the skybox. So again, in here, I'll right click, create material, and I'll call it, so this material I might use for any skybox that I want to use on this project. So I might call it a generic name like Skybox Master or something like that. Or just Skybox underscore MAT, but yeah, Skybox Master, I'll leave it that. And then you go up and change your shader on the material at the very top of the material. You change the shader to be Skybox Cube Map. So it's looking for a cube map, and I just created a cube map. So I'm going to then plug that in by dragging it over and dropping where it says none cube map. Now you don't see the sky change because I haven't plugged in this new material that I just made. So I'll go back to Window, Rendering, Lighting, go to environment. And here's where it says skybox material. It's looking for a skybox material. Now I could click there, or I could just drag it up, the material, not the cube map, and drop it in. And now I have my skybox. And you see the lighting changed quite a bit. So there are some things on this this cube map here. You do have, or this material, the skybox material that has the cube map plugged in. You have rotation, which allows you to rotate that whole thing around if you need to position it. As far as pushing it up, if I recall correctly, I don't think there's a way to do that inside of here. I think you have to do that by going out to your actual image. But let me see. Let me go back to the yeah, there's an intensity multiplier which will increase the effect of the skybox on the lighting. But I don't see any positional controls for it. And I don't recall actually doing that. I think that I always adjusted it in Photoshop to push it up. Because generally the way the skybox works is it only shows half of your overall image, and the rest of it's going to be underneath the ground. So if you push it up in the image, it will actually push it up here too. But I'll look around and see. I can't remember if you can actually move that around at all. Okay, so let's save that. So I wanted you to prepare some skyboxes. If you don't have one right now to plug in, you're going to want to use that. And the other thing that I wanted you to know about is that we can bring all the stuff from Bridge to Unity. But you have to do it a different way than we did it inside of Unreal Engine. So you can actually bring stuff from Unreal Engine too. You can export models and stuff and things out of there. But having Bridge models is really, really going to be nice. But what you have to do is you need to use the standalone version. So I want you to check that on these machines right now to see if the standalone version is there and working. Go to a search for Bridge. I requested it, but I don't remember if it's on all the machines or not. So here's the standalone version of Bridge. I'm going to open it. I'm not going to, again, we say later. Don't want to do that. No, don't update. Please don't update. And then you're going to need to log in. You can see that I'm actually already logged in here. And then if I go over and to my assets, let's bring in, for instance, let's bring in a rock. or maybe this Nordic Forest ledge rock or one of these guys. Bring in this rock. So what you have to do is you have to set up the export settings correctly. Do you guys have Bridge? Standalone Bridge, everybody has it? Okay. And so we can go here. Don't use a super high resolution, use 2K, the lowest that they have. Okay, we don't want super high. And go to this little arrows thing, and you have download settings and export settings. Check the download settings. Mainly, we need albedo. I would also take diffuse. We're not really going to use roughness or specular, but if you want to download those, maybe we might use them, but generally we're just going to use the albedo, possibly the diffuse, and the normal map. You could try displacement. There is a displacement thing too. But a lot of these other ones we're not going to use. If they're all checked, then uncheck some of them, or we don't need all that. And then under models, we want FBX. I would say you want source asset. You don't want UA asset, where if you're going to Unity, you don't need the UA asset. You just need the source asset. And I would say, for most cases, use the LOD0. And don't download all the LODs, because LODs is an Unreal thing. It's not a Unity thing, and it's not even going to use them. So just choose LOD0. And that's it. Source asset, FBX, LOD0. Go back out of that and download. It should go really fast. And then I'm going to go into my settings to the export settings, and I'm going to put on custom disk export and the pathway to where I want it to go. So in my case, I have a Quixel Bridge textures folder. Actually, I think I'll make a models folder. So this is inside of my class folder, and I'm going to do a new folder, and I'll just call it Megascan Models. And I'll select that. It's going to download it to my Megascans Models folder, custom disk export. I'm going to check the textures. Again, albedo, diffuse, and normal map are the most important ones. You might want roughness and specular. I don't think you really need a lot of those other ones. JPEGs are going to be fine. LOD0 under models. Don't worry about the file names, not important. Go back out of there and click the plus button. And it should say exporting custom disk export. And if I go check my folder, I have a Megascans folder. If I look in it, I've got a Stone VD3 EDGG. If I go into that, I'll see that I have an FBX and a color texture, which is an albedo, and a normal map. That's all I really need to bring it into Unity. So I'll go ahead and do that. Let's bring it into Unity. Go back into Unity. I have a My Models folder. There's nothing in it. I'll go ahead and drag the FBX into that folder. And then I'll drag the Now, before I drag the color ones and stuff like that in there too, I'm gonna look at the import settings on this model. Scale factor 1 is fine. But what I really want to look at down here is it going to create a collider for me? And generate colliders is usually off. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. I want to generate some colliders on this object. It's a mesh collider. I'll hit apply. And I should get a mesh collider on this object. If I don't, I'll create it manually, but it should actually do it. And then under materials, usually when I'm importing something, I like to have the materials come in so I can adjust them. So and I don't think that they're actually coming in from Quixel. So but I'm going to try it anyway. I'm going to go and switch this to from use embedded materials to use external materials, and recursive up I'm going to change to a local materials folder and apply it. What happens is that you'll get a materials folder here. You can go in and check and see if any materials came out of it. If I'm bringing something from Mixamo, they are there. If I'm bringing something from Quixel, it hasn't been there. Nothing's been there. So if I go and look at the model and drag it into my scene, I see it's pretty small. I probably, if I really want this to be bigger, I could come back here to the scale factor and set that to like 10. And I could scale it too. But if I set the scale factor to 10 and apply it, I'll see that rock gets a lot bigger. And so there's no materials I can see on it. It's got a default material here that it created for it. I'm going to plug in my other textures. So let's go drag those into this material now, or this material folder. So I'll bring the color texture in. I'll bring the normal texture in. And that's all I'll do for right now. The color texture is usually its import settings are fine. The only thing sometimes the ANISO level determines some quality, so I might pull that up a little bit and apply it. 2048 is good for an object size. And on this one, actually 2048 is 2K, that's what I downloaded at. And the normal map, however, you need to change the default texture to a normal map texture. And then I set the ANISO level to the same level, 5 is the other one. And I check to see it's using 2048 again, and I apply it. Now with those textures fixed, I can plug them into this default material that I have right here. I might want to change the name to like rock material. Or Quixel rock, something to tell me something about where I got this. And I'll plug in the color map to the albedo, plug in the normal map to the normal. I'm dragging them onto the little swatches next to the names. It's really small, so they're hard to see, but they're there. And then I'll drag the material itself onto the rock. And I can see that the material itself is kind of not very bright. It's kind of very gray, almost not even noticeable that it has much on it. You might want to mess with the smoothness a little bit. If you want some specular, there are some other shaders. I'm using just a standard shader, but there are other shaders that have specular on them. So let's see, don't use nature or anything. There's a standard specular setup, which will allow me to have a little bit more control over the specular, and there actually might be a specular map that I would want to use for that. Let me see if there is. Roughness. Yeah, there is a specular, but it looks pretty black, so I don't think it's really going to do anything. So let me go ahead and take a look at that map. It could be just the lighting. It's kind of a boring example, but yeah, it looks okay. It looks like a rock. And it does have a collider. So it's a pretty nice looking rock. And of course, you can put physics, you could put a rigid body on it. Actually, now that I look at it, okay, so there's the collider went on this child object here, not on the top level object. So let's try to add a rigid body and see if that's a little weird for it to be on the child object, because yeah, but it's fine. Let's try it. So I put some rigid body on it. So what I'm guessing would happen with this is that since it's on the child object, the oh, why is it down there? Ah, it fell right through the ground. So, I'm going to try something. Sometimes you may need to take the collider that on an object that imports and change it to convex. Let me just see if that fixes the problem. And let me move my FPS controller back a little bit so I can see it. Yeah, that fixed the problem. So you can see the physics and the collider, the mesh collider, everything is working on it pretty much perfectly. So that means that we can bring in any object from Quixel Bridge. We can bring in any surface from Quixel Bridge and use it on our terrain. It's going to make it so that you can make it almost look as good as the Unreal Engine scenes in Unity. Pretty nice. All right, we're out of time. So what I would like you to do for Wednesday is gather some Quixel Bridge materials and textures that you want to use in your terrain for this new game. If you want to remake your Unreal Engine 1 to be the same kind of look and feel and everything, you could get some of those same materials and textures and objects, and we can bring them into Unity and see how it works with Unity. It is going to change a little bit because some things are not going to transfer over. If you have a big Kraken creature, I don't know that it's going to work in Unity in the same way. Some things like trees and stuff, grass and things like that is gonna be different. You're not gonna be able to use the exact same things, but it'll still look good. And we'll continue with doing pickups and maybe a door opening, depending on how far we get on Wednesday. All right. Oh, and have a background too. Have some kind of skybox ready as well. Make sure you save your project.
These problems to